Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Scott Lauber joins us. Scott, great to have you back. Appreciate your time very much.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great, Scott. So Trey Turner.
Yeah.
This is obviously, the Phillies looked at shortstop. How much did it help that he had the relationship that he does with Bryce Harper?
Well, it didn't hurt, and it wasn't just Bryce Harper. He has a good relationship with Kevin Long, the hitting coach. He had what you might consider his two best seasons, at least offensively, with the Nationals, while Kevin Long was the hitting coach there. So there's history there as well. There's geography that played a part. Turner is from Florida. His wife is from New Jersey. There was a perception, at least, that he preferred the East Coast over the West Coast. And all of those things will be things that we get a chance to ask him about when the deal is completed and he comes to Philadelphia and has a news conference. But, look, at the end of the day, none of those things matter a whole lot if the Phillies hadn't made a $300 million offer over 11 years. And while I was told yesterday that it was not the highest offer, that he had a higher offer on the table from the San Diego Padres,
right?
It was close enough. And close enough, I guess, with all of those other factors, pointed to Philadelphia for him. So certainly a lot of connections there that definitely helped it along. But if the offer had not been competitive, I don't think he was gonna forgo that to come here for those connections.
Are the Phillies done at the winter meetings now that they have Turner?
No, because they still need a lot of pitching, and we're talking about middle of the rotation and back of the bullpen kind of things. So not a top of the rotation guy or anything like that. That's going to make huge headlines. The Turner signing is their biggest move of the offseason. But they have a lot of business left to do. I counted it up, and they have 6 free agent pitchers, 2 of whom, Zach Eflin and Kyle Gibson, have already moved on to other teams. Noah Syndergaard, David Robertson, Brad Hand, and Corey Knebel. And between those 6 pitchers, they logged 411 innings last year. So that's 411 innings that the Phillies need to replace. Not all of it will come internally, so they're going to need to go out there and find some pitching to help them. And that's kind of what their focus is on now, and kind of what they pivoted to. I don't know if they'll find it before the end of these meetings. They end tomorrow, but that's next on their list.
Drove in 100. We know he has speed. The reputation he has, and you tell me if what you understand versus what I've understood, is that he hits mediocre to bad pitching and just kills it, but does struggle against better pitching. What's the rep as you understand it?
You're talking about Turner, right?
Turner, yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't dug deeply enough into that to know, honestly, and I haven't heard that per se from people I've talked to about him. He's what's attractive or appealing about Turner is the speed-power combination, right? So he's usually a 20-20 guy, and those are in short supply. And there are things to like about a 29-year-old shortstop with a lot of speed who is going to be put now into a situation with bigger bases and more running in the game and more action in the game next year. There are reasons to like the way he might age as a 29-year-old shortstop going on 30. So, those are the reasons to like him. The reasons to have some pause are, it's an 11-year contract, right? So it's going to take him through age 40 by the time it's over. And you know that he's not going to be a shortstop that entire time. He's going to probably have to move to, second base or maybe even center field or third base or somewhere else off of shortstop. So how many years do you get of the 11 of Trey Turner as a shortstop? And how much value does he have once you have to move him off of that position? Does he lose some value? I'll tell you this, after talking to John Middleton last night, had a chance to talk to him on the phone, it's pretty clear that the Phillies are not concerned about 2030. And if Trey Turner is not a shortstop in 2030, that's fine with them, especially if they have a couple of World Series trophies to show for it. So, I mean, I think they feel like he's going to be a shortstop for a little while still. And if they get 4, 5, 6 more years of him at shortstop and win a couple of World Series, they'll take some of the loss of value at the back end of the deal for what they were able to get in the front end. So they're clearly going for it. They're going for it within the next, 3, 4, 5 years to try to win as many World Series as they can.
What happens now with Bryson Stott? Is it second base, or does he move?
No, it's second base. That's the plan. They like Stott a lot, and they also know that they need players. They need homegrown young players at the lower end of the salary spectrum, right, in order to make this thing work.
Yeah,
so you can have a roster with $5, $20 million plus per year players if you have, homegrown guys at the other end who are producing and contributing for you. So Stott's one of those guys. They like him a lot. They think that there's a lot of growth in there. They still see him as a potential leadoff guy or top of the order type guy down the road. So they'll move him to second base, and I think be pretty happy with the fact that they have a controllable young player at close to minimum salary playing next to Trey Turner.
Any thoughts about the numbers being thrown around? $86 million for Verlander. DeGrom got a gigantic contract, even though you have as many innings pitched in the last 5 years as he does. $300 million for Trey Turner. Is that just become the norm in your mind, or are you surprised by the numbers we're seeing?
I think I'm never surprised.
Yeah, I agree.
Somebody told me a long time ago that all it takes is one team, right? So You might hear early in the offseason, you might hear an agent, or you might hear whispers from an agent or a player saying, like, here's what we're looking for. And you might say to yourself, and I know this has happened many, many times since I started covering baseball in 2006, you hear something like that and you think to yourself, well, that's crazy. He'll never get that contract. And all it takes is one team to go give it to him, and that's what he gets. And so there's always the one-team philosophy, never, ever leaves me surprised with what anybody gets. What is a little bit, I don't know if disturbing is the right word, unsettling maybe, is that there's really not a ton of teams that are making these deals with players. Like, Jacob deGrom gets the contract he got from a team in Texas that's trying to spend money and win. Verlander goes to the Mets. We know they like to spend money. Turner goes to the Phillies. I mean, Middleton's been pretty clear about what he's willing to do. The Yankees, if they don't, they're either going to sign Aaron Judge, or if they don't sign Aaron Judge, they're going to make a big strike for somebody else. It's the same teams over and over again that are spending the big money, and it's the same teams. I often wonder, like, what it would be like to come to these meetings and cover the Pirates, or cover the Royals. Why even attend? Because that the team is not going to make a big move or make a big signing, and that's got to be frustrating to the fan bases. That's got to be frustrating to people who live in those places, that their teams just are not, their ownerships are not willing to compete with the big boys. And so that's the only part of it, I think, that, you walk away from these things every year and you say, well, why is it always the same teams over and over again? And why are those, it's no secret that those are the teams that end up in the postseason. They don't always win it, but they're the teams that end up being the most competitive, and it's the other teams that are not. So that's the only part of this that's a little bit, unsettling or disappointing, or however you want to put it.
Yeah, I put it as disconcerting. Where I just sit there and I look at it, and I agree with you, Scott. And you really only have to cover 8 teams. And the other 22, I mean, Texas is desperate, so they made that move. Okay, I got that part. But if you're covering somebody else, why bother? I mean, that's the Pirates.
Yeah,
Santana's their big signing. What are you going to do? Make him the Grand Marshal of the parade?
Right, exactly. And that's why it's, it feels like not everyone's playing in the same league, and that's a problem for baseball, because you would like to think that in the majority of the 30 cities, and it's not going to happen in all 30 every year, but in the majority of the 30 cities on opening day, fans think they have a chance. Their team has a chance to win, and that's not the case in, I haven't sat down and counted them up, but that's not the case in a good number of markets you can't legitimately sit there on opening day and say, my team has a chance to win the World Series. Now, things happen, and if we talked about, and I think we did on June 3rd when the Phillies fired Joe Girardi, if you talked to any Phillies fan and said, how do you feel about your team, you probably wouldn't have found any that said they have a chance to win the World Series, and they got to Game 6. So things happen, and surprises happen. But, the Phillies also, were probably the most expensive, underdog team in a World Series, ever, right? Like, how many $240 million payrolls are underdogs in a World Series? They were built to win, and they ended up winning, even if it was in a roundabout way. So, if you were to tell a Pirates fan or a Royals fan or a Tigers fan that their team's going to be in the World Series, there's really no chance, and it won't happen.
Has the free agency component at the moment, especially with Aaron Judge being at the front of it, has that in some ways, for the moment, put a pause on making trades? Because now you want to see who you get in a free agent, then what do I need in a trade? Is that been the pattern you're seeing?
I think so, to a certain extent. I think it's generally put a bit of a drag on the market as a whole. Like, I came here Sunday thinking, like, Aaron Judge, and I wrote this, that Aaron Judge would be the first position player domino to fall, right? Because, it seemed like, so he's a unique player, number one, and, there were 4 elite shortstops that were free agents this year, but there were 4 of them. And Aaron, there are not 4 Aaron Judges, so that he was a unique player. And number 2, the market for him seemed to be a lot smaller. It's the Yankees, it's the Giants, primarily. Maybe it's the Dodgers on a shorter term, higher average annual value kind of deal. But there aren't a ton of teams lining up for Aaron Judge the way there are for these shortstops, because there are more of them. So I kind of thought, well, once Aaron Judge, the Aaron Judge domino falls, like, let's say the Yankees re-sign him. Now the Giants jump into the shortstop market, right? And maybe Correa goes or something like that. I think the reason Turner wound up going was because he got an 11-year, $300 million deal that was sitting there for him. And he had 2 teams in the Phillies and the Padres that were willing to sort of bid one another up and see what happens. So, I think, and I think there was a perception out there that of the 4 shortstops, Turner was either the best or was going to get the most money or, whatnot. So I think that was unique in and of itself, that there were 2 teams that were pretty aggressive on that front. And the Phillies, let's say this, I mean, the Phillies had a very, very specific need. They had a need for a shortstop, and there were 4 of them to choose from. And my experience covering Dave Dombrowski since his Red Sox days has been that when he can identify a very specific need for his club, he does not wait around. He likes to be aggressive, and he likes to do it. He did it with David Price very early in the offseason with the Red Sox when he needed an ace in 2016, and he's done it here with the shortstop. So, there was that element of it too. But, yeah, I do. I think that you asked about Judge. I think that it's kind of holding up the other shortstops a little bit. And it's probably holding up the trade market, because if you're the Giants, for instance, and you don't get Aaron Judge, you've got to go find that big piece somewhere else. And whether it's a shortstop or a major trade for somebody, you've got to look in other areas. So, yeah, I do think that once that piece is completed and we know where Aaron Judge is going to play, we'll see things move a lot more quickly.
And what's interesting about that is that, except for the Time magazine article, Judge doesn't talk, his agent doesn't talk, the Yankees don't talk, and the Giants don't talk. There's nobody talking. So from a reporter's point of view, that's not a big help, Scott.
No. And take it from someone who covers the team that is very good about not leaking anything and not talking. That's very frustrating as a reporter, because all you're trying to do is read the tea leaves a little bit, or get the temperature of what's going on, so that you're not, misleading anyone, or you're as accurate as possible, or you're not wildly off base. I can't tell you how many times I've said, like, okay, if I write this, you don't have to tell me what's going on, but if I write this, am I completely off base? And just, you just don't want to be led astray. And you hope that behind the scenes, maybe in the judge thing, that some of that is going on, but we don't know because, as you said, like nobody's been real public about that. I just sort of walked away from an area of the meetings a little while ago where Scott Boras was holding court for his, for many of us, and he's one of the few agents who does do that at these things where he doesn't necessarily tell you anything, but he's willing to talk about his clients, and it's just good. It's just good to get their names out there from his perspective. So. But it also gives you a chance to ask him questions, and that's a good give and take to have as a reporter.
It's always great to talk with you, Scott. Great work as always, keeping everybody informed. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Steve. Talk to you soon.